we want to talk. We're continuing discussions about cybersecurity. Seems to be a recurring theme, and many of you have joined previous sessions around cybersecurity. And oftentimes we talk about technology. Oftentimes we talk about solutions that we need to put in place to do all the cool things that all of these cybersecurity solutions are doing to protect our organizations, our data, our business continuity, all of those things. But we're going to talk today about some things that we can do to arm probably the most important component of a cybersecurity stance, which is our users, and how to bring some awareness and training to that group. So just a quick introduction for Ryan. As I mentioned, he's our field engineer team manager. So he makes sure that all the folks that you see walk into your office, those smiling faces to fix issues, that they're trained, they're knowledgeable, they're doing the right things, and we're paying attention to what's going on with our clients. He's got a ton of experience in lots of different areas, including cybersecurity and how these kinds of programs can be set up, how they can best be managed, and how we can, just ensure that all of your users have the knowledge that they need. So, Ryan, let's get started. We hear it. Oh, sorry. Before I go further, let me just remind you that we would love to hear from you. So if you do have any questions, use the chat feature in this Teams window. So we'll be able to see those your comments and questions and try to get them answered throughout the presentation. Of course, as always, we can talk about this stuff for hours. We'll try to keep it to the 20 to 25 minutes. So we do hear it, again and again about educating users, and that being one of the best ways to protect technology and the business environment. When you think of the castles of the medieval days, you could have the whitest moat with the meanest dragon and the best archers and the hottest tar. But if somebody lowers the drawbridge and lets the bad guys in, none of that stuff matters. And it's kind of the role that our users have, is to make sure that they don't let that drawbridge down. So how are organizations doing this effectively today? What are some best case or best practice scenarios that you hear about and that we suggest and educate our clients on?
Certainly. Yeah, you're absolutely right. In any business, employees are the most important asset. So they're the most likely asset also to be phished, whaled, socially engineered in some way to gain access to that confidential data, which is so valuable to any organization. There are certainly several different products on the market that can provide employee training for either a specific or more generalized threats. The most effective tool is the one that gets your organization's employees to actually adapt their behaviors and protect that critical information from some sort of a bad actor in some way. So generally more effective to partner with a provider like us to give you more of a turnkey approach, since business leaders, managers really don't have time usually to inspect and research emerging threats. So you want a solution that has both the training aspect on the right or desired behaviors, and then also has a certain degree of testing without making that employee feel watched or micromanaged in some way. The most common threat landscape, obviously, is email. So those tests usually come in the form of some sort of regular phishing test emails that are then tracked back to the individual users. The goal in all of those situations is never to trick or get an employee to fall victim to an attack, but rather try to get you some information as who is most likely to fall for the most common tactics used by the bad actors. So partnering with us, we come up with a solution and a training program with you based on your industry, and try to then provide testing and provide that data back to clients, not in real time, but kind of on a monthly or quarterly basis, in order to determine what the best course of action is to take with your staff.
Yeah, you mentioned email, and that is kind of, I think, by and large, been the most common approach. Is that, and unfortunately, the bad guys have gotten a lot better than being, the prince from some African country that has millions of dollars and they need your bank account to send it to you. But we have seen an increase in other unique things. We've got recently been working with one client that has been getting, their user have been getting phone calls where the person is suggesting that they're calling from their IT firm and they need to do an update to something, and so need to get access to the device, and are phishing for information. And when somebody says, "Oh, you're calling from Elevity," they're telling other people who are making those same calls and trying to get access in different ways. So while email has been and predominantly the main way of getting access, we're seeing them get more and more creative. because unfortunately the returns are greater and greater. So there's a lot of things for us to educate on, and I think it's critical that we stay on top of that, as you mentioned. So what are some of the tools that are available on the market? Obviously we have chosen what we feel to be best in class for what we're trying to do. But what are some of those tools that are available, and roughly, for perspective, how much do those cost?
Yeah, the tool we use most often and promote is Mimecast. There are some other ones that certainly provide a similar sort of service. The particular component from Mimecast is the security awareness and training module. There are other competitors like KnowBe4 provides a similar training plus phishing tests sort of situation, as well as you can do in-person tests essentially of your network, where someone would come in and drop flash drives around your location, and that's a little more intensive testing and training as well. From the Mimecast side, that contains both the training aspect with suggested training modules that are industry appropriate, that make it a little bit easier to choose what you want to provide to your clients, essentially. They mimic common vendors as well as current topics and events. They have, COVID-related emails, and with the current situation in Europe, they obviously are seeing threats related to a lot of charitable organizations, unfortunately, trying to target people's good nature of trying to help out other individuals. The cost from someone like Mimecast gets as low as roughly $1 per user per month. Kind of goes up from there depending on how complicated the test is. Obviously, if you're going to have someone come in and try to do social engineering attacks against your users when you have to use a real person, those can get relatively expensive relatively quickly. One of the reasons we use Mimecast is it has two big advantages over their competitors. First, it provides some instant feedback on the phishing test emails for either the desired or undesirable behavior, and it's in a really non-confrontational way and encouraging the right behavior, as opposed to making someone feel caught or outed that they did the improper or dangerous behavior. Some other products on that tend to be a little bit aggressive or overly negative focused on what was done wrong, or they simply don't provide instant feedback at all, so the end user has no idea that it was a test and they thought it was a real attack, and they report that to management and end up on a report. The second reason for Mimecast being so prevalent is that they are really, really short, just 3 to 4 minutes, use some humor, lightheartedness to get their point across. That really makes the training more memorable, less of a chore for users, because the goal is always to get behavior to change. And the only way you can get behavior to change is if individuals actually believe that the decisions they're making have an impact on the security of the business, and they're really aware and cognizant of the fact that, hey, this email I click on, this person on the phone that I give some improper information to, or the conversation I'm having in a public space is maybe not appropriate since we're discussing something that could be used against the company at some point in the future.
Yeah, so relatively inexpensive, but can be dramatically impactful. And their training videos are funny. they're entertaining to watch. They've done a nice job with bringing some humor around a topic that maybe isn't super exciting, but as we've discussed, is very impactful. Yeah, as we mentioned, you brought up some good examples. I mentioned a couple of things that we're dealing with. The bad guys continue to get better and continue to get creative. It's not so easy to spot all of these things, and are finding new ways to infiltrate our data. So how often should this content be refreshed? Whose responsibility is it to manage all of that? What are best practices around those things?
Yeah, the content is certainly updated by the vendor, in this case, Mimecast, continually. The topics that are covered, there's basically a universal set and then a more specific set to any given time. And that's kind of a co-managed sort of approach that how we do it. So minimally, you want to kind of have an annual review of the training, but ideally that's going to be more like quarterly, so that you can actually make decisions closer to an impactful time, so that your users aren't constantly having the incorrect behavior going forward, and you have proper interventions, as well as insights into where your team is at, because all about having that data. Your partner, like us, will be able to provide that to whatever manager that is appropriate for their team. And obviously, you can take a team approach and get everyone on board in that manner.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that we have picked a partner for this because one, we like the training, we like their approach, but it's also combined with some other solutions that we feel are critical with email security and email management. But there are other good tools that are out there, and I think one decision that an organization would need to make as they're considering their approach to this is how they want to manage it. Is there can you outsource it, kind of set it and forget it, set a timeline, a schedule, and then worry about the results, or do you want to have team members who are managing that, making sure that it's getting done, distributing, the testing and the training and managing all of that. So there are tools that are more self-serve, and if you have people in groups that want to own that, there are options out there, or there are like ours, programs where you can say, okay, here's what I want, go do it. Tell me how my team succeeded or failed, and you guys make sure you manage it all. So I think that's part of the decision beyond whether the training and the testing tool is good, is how do you want to be involved, and how much time do you want your team to consider and be involved in delivering it. Okay, so let's talk about the timeline. Is this just for new team members? Is it for people who have been around a long time, young, old, in the office, working from home? Really, when should cybersecurity training start, and how often should users complete it?
That is always certainly a bit of a push and pull from the desire to get a new employee on the job, contributing to the organization in their specific role versus kind of taking the time to lay a firm security foundation. The training really needs to start on day one, because you want to set that tone. And that being that every decision an employee makes regarding company data has an impact on the security of the organization. And certainly, in some cases, the ability of the organization to stay in business, since organizations that don't protect their confidential data rarely stay in business. So what we found is a appropriate approach is kind of simple monthly training. Video only consumes 5-ish minutes of an employee time. They have the flexibility to complete that whenever really it works for them. And they can get reminders automatically set, so they don't forget that. And if they build up 2 or 3, obviously that could be a management decision to allow that or disallow that, or what kind of response to have. But really needs to be a recurring event so that it stays in the forefront of someone's mind. Monthly seems to be about right. You certainly could do it more often than that if you like. But if you do go more often than monthly, it kind of gets lost in the noise, and you're almost focusing on it so much that it is not something that registers particularly well with employees.
Yeah, that frequency and productivity balance is important for sure. One of the things that I wanted to ask about was reporting functionality back to the IT department or whoever is going to be responsible for this, whether that's your partner delivering that reporting back or the tool that you choose delivering it back. What insight can organization glean from the built-in testing and reporting? How does all of that work, the operational side of it?
For our solution, all the data is really collected within the awareness portal. It's really detailed, and you kind of have some interaction with it. So it's not a simple PDF report that can just be, simply given to someone and encompasses every single piece of the training. Individual items can certainly be exported, but it's best to kind of review that quarterly or semi-annually and actually go through that with someone that understands what's being trained and what the threat environment looks like. For example, every module has its own metrics, so you can see what the employee sentiment on training in general is over time, as well as that individual's threat score. Ideally, you want to see an individual threat score improving. That might start at a D, move to a C, and maybe a B, and in a perfect world, hopefully they get to that A score where they are performing correctly and what you want in the behaviors in terms of not falling for phishing emails, getting the simple 1-question quiz correct. But occasionally, if you look at those scores, you might see some slight reversion from an employee. And that is really a signal for some sort of intervention. That could be simply improved training, sending some additional videos, It could even be simply a manager discussion with that particular individual that they might have had some life events or something that was causing a significant distraction. And then they are not paying attention to security and making some poor decisions within your environment. No matter what the reason, obviously viewing that threat score lets you be proactive with users to prevent a breach from occurring in the first place. The after brief conversations are never as pleasant, since that usually gets involved with some business insurance provider or perhaps a regulatory agency or something of that nature. So it's really best to stay on top of that score and really work to get all of your users up to a level that you feel comfortable that they will make good security decisions on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's good. Appreciate that. Just a quick reminder, if you do have a question, now would be a good time to pop it into that chat section of the Teams panel, and we'll take a look at it and try to get it answered. Well, one thing I did want to mention is that whenever we talk about cybersecurity, we talk about a multi-layered approach. There's no silver bullet or one solution, one wall you can build. It's a layered approach, and you've got to be thinking about many different angles. No different than your health. You can't just sleep a lot and be healthy. You've got to eat fruits and vegetables, eat a balanced diet, get a little bit of exercise, make sure you sleep right. But it's all of those things, and really no different with a cybersecurity approach. The multi-factor authentication, training your users on things to look out for, having good password management, having good technology and the solutions in place that can catch something that's not going right, and then the right program in place to respond and potentially recover from those situations. So, having that multi-layered approach, consistently looking at that. The world continues to change. The neighborhood that used to be nice and comfortable and you didn't have to lock your front door, your back door, and you could leave your keys in your car has changed. The global neighborhood that we all live in today is not as safe as it used to be, and we've got to continue to deliver or to continue to think about the things that need to be in place to protect not only our organization and the data and our users, but the continuity of the organization and how we can recover if something bad does happen, which unfortunately it does, and at a little bit more of an increasing rate. So, Brian, I want to thank you for taking the time to share some of this information about security awareness training. It is a very important component of a strong strategy, one that sometimes does get overlooked compared to some of the more expensive, more advanced, maybe even more interesting tools that are out there. But if the users aren't trained, some of the rest of that stuff just doesn't matter. So we'd love to have a further conversation about how a good security awareness training program can work for you and your organization. If you're already using Mimecast from us and don't feel that some of that awareness training has been deployed in the right way or frequent enough or correctly for your organization specifically, we're happy to talk about that. Or if you don't have a solution, of course, we'd love to have a discussion around that as well. So thanks again for taking the time. If there's anything that we can do to further this discussion, we have our contact information here at the end. I'll come back to this in a second because I want to cover a couple other things. Just so that you are aware, we do have at elevityit.com/events, there are several things that are upcoming, both in-person events in a couple markets, as well as webinar and webinar events. One of those that's coming up is within our emerging technology series, evolving infrastructure, really taking a look at that server infrastructure that organizations have. What's new, what's current, what's the right thing to be considering as you look to the future. And we feel that hyperconverged is definitely one of those things to consider. I'm also going to throw out a little shameless plug of something that we've been working on, and we'll be excited to bring out is a podcast series where we're going to spend time talking about focusing on outcomes and the outcomes that our clients are achieving by leveraging technology to not only win in their business, but how they then support their community in the things that they do to give back or the things that they do to be involved. We're really excited to have some great speakers already lined up or great clients that we're going to interview. We'll be talking to both our clients and others in the communities that we live and work. So we're very excited about continuing to deliver content and information about not only how to protect your business, how to be more successful, but also what others are doing. We're really excited about that. So stay tuned, more to come, but we'll be coming out with a podcast here soon. Lastly, as always, don't forget to grab your gift card here for attending. It's I think it's a $5 coffee gift card. You can either scan that QR code or type in that URL real quick. I'll leave it up here for a couple seconds and I'll flip to our email addresses, but anyone at Elevity can respond to a question that you have, get you in touch with the right person. If you'd like to talk further about security awareness training or any of the many layers of a good security fabric, we'd be happy to educate, talk to, provide information on what we can do and what you can do to protect yourself. Deep breath. Ryan, thanks again for joining. It was great having you on. Here is our contact information if we can be of any assistance, and we will talk to you all soon.